So nice to be here. Thank you for having me. Not that you had any say in it, but I am really glad to be here. And my beautiful wife is here with me this weekend, Beth, and we have two kids, Jack and Callie, who are at home. So we have really suffered through basically what has felt like 2 or 3 days of nonstop dating without kids, and it's been really nice. I have to say up front, I feel a lot of pressure to use a British accent. Can we admit that just makes you sound a lot smarter? You know? No. Nice to meet y'all. All right. No, we do kind of associate a certain, with some exceptions, we do associate a certain image, kind of comes to mind when you hear someone with a certain accent, or you hear someone is from a particular area. My wife and I are Midwesterners. We met in St. Louis, married there, our children were born there, and we now live in Alabama. And so just in our time here, just over the last few days, we've noticed some differences. And just as, do you kind of have an image in your head that's formed when you hear that we live in Alabama? You can be honest. Yeah. Okay. Now, you probably picked up on this, but our friends and all from Alabama, they've got a particular image that comes to mind when they think of California. Yeah. We were out yesterday, and I saw, for the first time, I saw a guy on a bike with a rack for his surfboard attached to his bike. I had never seen a surfboard rack on a bike. And to me, I was like, that kind of makes sense. I guess the next step would be a Prius with a surfboard on it, okay? Now, when you think of Alabama, though, what vehicle do you think of? A pickup truck. And it doesn't have a surf rack, it has a... Yeah, see? Yeah, I do have a truck. It looks a little weird with my journal hanging off the gun rack, but no. But we kind of have certain images that instantly come to mind. And it's something I want to say. I want to go ahead and transition into where I'm going with this, and that is everybody has a particular image that they give off. When your name is mentioned and you're not around, your family or friends or coworkers, there is a certain image that comes to mind. And an image is just a picture. It's just a mental snapshot it's based on externals. If you are following along and filling in the blanks, I'll try and keep everything in order for that. But the thing that there is about image, I want to say that there's really, it's neutral. There's nothing really wrong about having an image. You can't avoid that. People are going to have an image of you. I tell people that I am married to Elizabeth Taylor, okay? And that right there kind of conjures up a certain image. When I was a youth pastor, and we met, and we were dating, and we got engaged, I announced to the youth group, to our students, I said, Beth and I got engaged. She's going to be Elizabeth Taylor. And the youth totally didn't get it. No response at all, But there's a certain image that goes along with a name, with a certain place that you might live, a type of work that you do, all of these things. But the most significant downside to image really is when it becomes the basis of our self-worth. That's when a danger can creep in. Although we can't avoid having giving off a certain image, whether it's good or bad, the danger is when we begin to base our sense of self-worth on what that external image is, on what other people are thinking of us. And can we admit that an image is very fragile? It can be shattered in an instant. You may know some people that have worked hard their entire life to maintain a certain image, but just one slip of the tongue, one bad day, one click of the mouse, something like that. It's just as simple as that. And an image can show just these deep fissures, and it falls apart right there. And so I want us to, as we look at the scriptures today, I don't read the scriptures without seeing or imagining what it is like. Image, obviously a root word for imagine. And I want us to imagine what this particular individual must have looked like and what his life kind of describes for us. We're going to look at a character by the name of Job. So if you'll turn to Job chapter 1, if you have your Bible, kind of open up in the middle to Psalms and hang a left. That's the quickest way to Job. Maybe you have a Bible app and you can pull it up that way, or maybe you have the Bible memorized and you just didn't need to bring anything today. And you just want to show off and lip sync everything that's about to take place. But I want to read in these first 5 verses of Job chapter 1, it gives us a description, and as you hear this about Job, it would be natural for us to kind of conjure a certain image. And so with that in mind, we'll read the words, but I want to just encourage you to think about what pictures come to mind. There was a man in the land of Uz whose name was Job, and that man was blameless and upright, one who feared God and turned away from evil. There were born to him 7 sons and 3 daughters. He possessed 7,000 sheep, 3,000 camels, 500 yoke of oxen, and 500 female donkeys, and very many servants, so that this man was the greatest of all the people of the East. His sons used to go and hold a feast in the house of each one on his day, and they would send and invite their 3 sisters to eat and drink with them. And when the days of the feast had run their course, Job would send and consecrate them, and he would rise early in the morning and offer burnt offerings according to the number of them all. For Job said, "It may be that my children have sinned and cursed God in their hearts." Thus Job did continually. So what are some of the images that come to mind? Maybe the first thing you pick up on is the fact that, boy, he was really a family man. He was a family. He had a big family, but not just that he had a big family, but that he was really devoted to his family. I bet he was a good dad. And you even kind of read into this a little bit, and you realize, that his sons, when they would have a feast, they would invite their sisters to show up. And so I'm kind of right there thinking this guy must have been a good dad, because how many of us can rarely get our sons and our daughters to really want to hang out together, So a family man maybe is one image that comes to mind. Another image that maybe came to mind is that he's extremely wealthy. The listing of all of his possessions there, his livestock, is an indication that he was living a very blessed life. In that community and that culture, the more that you had, the more it was a sign of God's blessings. It was a rather superstitious culture that if you were blessed financially, then you must be living right. And if not, then you must have done something terribly wrong. You must have sin in your life. And so here's this man. He's very devoted as a father. He's a family man. He's extremely wealthy. He was probably the envy of the neighborhood. And then we also see that he was a very religious man. In our terms, we wouldn't use the word religious. We would say he's very spiritual, or he is a Christian. Obviously, this is a Jewish culture there, but he was one that had thoughts of God continually, and he lived in a very committed way to live out his faith, as it's showing how he is offering sacrifices and praying, interceding on behalf of his family. So here's this guy, this envy of the neighborhood, who's really got his life together. He was what you could say he was a very blessed man. But he was also a marked man. In the next few verses, just for the sake of time, I'm not going to read them, but beginning in verse 6, for the next 5 or 6 verses, what is described for us is that Job was a marked man, and it was his devotion to God that captured the attention of the enemy. In one way, I don't know if you're a fan of Gary Larson and the Far Side cartoons, if you remember those. This is kind of what came to mind with when I think of this. At the bottom, it says, "Bummer of a birthmark, Hal." And Job kind of had this target on his life. But understand this, it wasn't a birthmark. It was, to use a biblical term, it was a rebirth mark. He had been, to use the words of Jesus in John chapter 3, he was born again. As he was a member of this new family with God as his father, he had a target on his life. There was an enemy that was out to defeat him. And as I said earlier, so much in that culture, so much of your image was shaped by these externals. And Job had more than an external relationship with God. It was very internal. And in this dialogue that takes place in these few verses of Job, Satan and God are going back and forth, and Satan says to God, well, no wonder Job loves you. Look at how much you've blessed him. I mean, who wouldn't love a God that's given him all of this? And God's pushback was, well, I don't think he loves me just because I've given him all this stuff. I think he loves me because of who I am. And you could kind of think of it this way, and you could write this, and the spelling is important. Satan accused Job of only loving God for his presence, presents, but God knew that Job loved him simply for his presence, presence, his nearness. When my wife and I get home on Monday and we see our kids, they're gonna, they'll acknowledge that we're there, but they're gonna start going through our suitcases. presents is what they're after. And Satan is saying to God, well, you've given him all of these gifts, of course. And God says, no, I think just for my nearness alone, he's in this relationship with me. And so let's read this and let's understand that in one day, Job's image in his community was completely destroyed. Alexander has nothing on this terrible, horrible, no good, very bad day that we're about to read. Let's pick it up in verse 13. Now there was a day when his sons and daughters were eating and drinking wine in their oldest brother's house. And there came a messenger to Job and said, the oxen were plowing and the donkeys feeding beside them. And the Sabaeans fell upon them and took them and struck down the servants with the edge of the sword. And I alone have escaped to tell you. While he was yet speaking, there came another and said, the fire of God fell from heaven and burned up the sheep and the servants and consumed them. And I alone have escaped to tell you. While he was yet speaking, there came another and said, the Chaldeans formed 3 groups and made a raid on the camels and took them and struck down the servants with the edge of the sword, and I alone have escaped to tell you. While he was yet speaking, and at this point you kind of wonder if Job is like, okay, no more servants, yet speaking. No more. Don't let any more in. I don't even need any more of this news. While he was yet speaking, there came another and said, your sons and daughters were eating and drinking wine in their oldest brother's house, and behold, a great wind came across the wilderness and struck the 4 corners of the house, and it fell upon the young people, and they are dead, and I alone have escaped to tell you. When life slips through your fingers, when the illusion of the control that you had begins to reveal what really is happening, and that is that you don't have control, or when your image is shattered, let me ask you, who or what is your go-to? When things don't go your way, when this image that you have, among others, is at risk of being lost, what's your go-to? This response of Job is absolutely amazing, if for no other reason because he was not concerned with image management. He wasn't hiring a PR person to help maintain a certain image and what was going on. Let's read in verses 20 and 21 this remarkable response. Then Job arose and tore his robe and shaved his head and fell on the ground and pitched a fit. Is that what it says? He fell on the ground and drank heavily. Is that what it says? He fell on the ground and he posted his rant on Facebook. Job arose, tore his robe, shaved his head, and fell on the ground and worshiped. And he said, naked I came from my mother's womb, Naked shall I return. The Lord gave, and the Lord has taken away. Blessed be the name of the Lord. Wow. I mean, I read this, and it's almost incomprehensible that someone could respond in that way. I flew 4 hours in coach, and I was a bear. And I read this, and he responds with such grace as a worshiper. Now, the cynical side of me is like, well, he must just have a different personality type. He must be wired in such a way that that's how he's going to respond. Or, you know, the amateur psychiatrist in me is like, well, this is clinical denial if I've ever seen it. We kind of try and rationalize this, but I think one of the things about Scripture that we have to realize is we are seeing stories of these people, but we have an opportunity to actually see our story in their story. So could it be that Job really is no different than us? And if so, what can we learn from Job? I don't deny at all the fact that his response was beautiful, but I sometimes wonder how he did that. And with kind of thinking through this, I believe that Job based his worth and his value not on his image, but rather on his identity. An identity, an ID is required. The proper ID is required if you're going to respond in life with consistency in the way that Job did. Identity, as opposed to image, is who you truly are. It's a definition of who you are, and eventually your identity is going to show through. It's almost like trying to hold several beach balls beneath the surface of the water in a swimming pool. And you can only do that so long, and eventually they're going to come up. Eventually, I don't care what kind of image you have, eventually your identity is going to show through. So who are you identified with? Job revealed that his identity was rooted in a loving Father. His identity was not rooted in an image of wealth or an image of being a really good, churchy kind of guy. His identity was one that he was loved by God, and he loved God for God's nearness, for his presence, Presence. And as this begins to surface, we kind of can see how it would be impossible to worship and give praise if you thought you yourself were shattered. We have to keep in mind, it's just an image that gets shattered. It's not you yourself that becomes shattered, because this is the gospel. Nothing can shatter or dismantle or steal your identity as a child of God. Is that great news or what? We have to understand that our identity is not based upon what we do, because that's just image, the externals. Our identity is based upon our acceptance of the work of Christ done for us. At the core of who we are transformed because of the work of Christ on our behalf. And as our identity is based on that work of Christ, then we are able to respond as one who is a worshiper. And the Bible teaches us how nothing can dismantle or shatter this work of Christ done for us. So when all of the externals of your image are stripped away, what's left? What's left? If you had a terrible, horrible, no good, very bad day, what's left? And this is something that I've wrestled with. This is a passage that for years I've read, and I almost just put a big question mark over it. Like, how in the world? You know, this is just impossible to live out. And I've really kind of wrestled with this text. And in my mind, I feel like I kind of began to gain some clarity, and I want you to see kind of what I had pictured in my head. And so for that, I want to have some people come up and help me with this illustration that we're going to do. So Scott and Grandpa Bob. All right, yes. Mike, you want to come on down? All right, yes, Jenny and Kathleen, yes. All right, great, thank you. All right. Okay, Now, you all had a chance to work on this interpretive dance, so this is going to be new for her, but no, I'm just kidding. We're gonna have you represent different characters, okay? So, Grandpa Bob, I'm going to have you over here at the end, all right? And then Kathleen and Jenny and nice try, Scott. I know what you're trying to do. He was here for the first service. And then Mike. Okay, so I'll have you kind of step up just a little bit, okay? And let me introduce you to the characters that we just read about in Job. This, ladies and gentlemen, is Job, okay? All right? And kind of as a way to introduce Job to his life here, this is your life. Okay, Job, you have a wonderful family, sons and daughters. You're going to kind of pull off both. Is that okay? All right. All right. And then he had, the scriptures refer to the fact that you had a multitude of servants, but really these were his most trusted friends. These were his closest. Yeah, okay. Yeah. And then you had a lot of animals. Yes. Kind of a Green Acres feel, yeah. All right. And then Job, you have God in your life, who, as we see, just jumped on the bandwagon as a Warriors fan. God is, yeah. And so this is kind of your life, and in one day, Job, this is what happened. In one day, you lost all of your possessions, all of your wealth. You lost your closest friends, and you lost your family. And so you are left with what?
God.
Yeah. You're left with God. And this is kind of the quandary that I found myself in. As I was thinking about this, if I lost everything, I don't question that I would still have God in my life, but would I fall to the ground and worship and give praise to him? And I just really wrestled with this, knowing that I had God in my life, but why isn't my response more worshipful when things don't go my way? For the sake of comfort, you can stand back up for just a moment, okay? And it says, the scriptures tell us that he fell to the ground in worship. And that what that does not mean is that Job fell to the ground as Scott and the band came out and began playing and put him in a better mood. We kind of tend to think of worship musically, which is natural, and that is certainly a form of worship. But I want us to maybe kind of step back and see this from a little bigger perspective of worship. I had an opportunity to go to, when I lived in the Midwest at the time in St. Louis, I was asked to speak at a youth camp in Daytona Beach. And when you live in the Midwest and you're asked to go to do something on the beach, you don't really pray about it. You just go, okay? And so that's what I did. And the hotel that we're at for this camp is right there on the beach. And I realized that the sun came up, the sunrise was going to take place right there over the water. And I just thought, this is going to be beautiful. I don't want to miss this. So I got up at 10 o'clock and it was already up. I don't know how that happened. No. I set my alarm really early, and I took my Bible and my journal, and I remember just kind of hollowing out a space in the sand, and I couldn't wait to catch what was about to take place in front of me. And this is what I journaled that morning. The sky is mostly pink right now as I anxiously anticipate sunrise. A soft breeze blows at my back, and the technicians in heaven are turning on the power and allowing the electricity to begin to flow through the neon pink clouds. Full power and full light are mere moments away. And at that point, I remember looking up and seeing just that top crest of the sun over the horizon, and I watched it over the next just like 2 or 3 minutes as it rose over the horizon, which I don't recommend staring at the sun like that. Apparently that's not good, but it just really captivated me. And I remember looking back at my journal and I couldn't write because all I could see were blue spots. So when the blue spots went away, I continued. There it is. This is what I've been waiting for, the sun. No more red haze. It's now a glowing ball of fire. We say the sun has come up, but actually, it is just the rest of the world coming around. Isn't that just like us to think that everything revolves around us? Forgive me, Father, for falsely thinking that when you are present, that you have shown up. Like the sun, you are always there and have been waiting for us to come around. Thanks for waiting. Reds and oranges have now faded to a warm yellow. The sun is where the sun, S-O-N, always wants to be, directly in front of me. For the sun to be anywhere but right in front of me means that I have turned away or spun off in a different direction. But if I am faithful, I will again see the returning of the world and not just the rising of the sun. Each day begins with a similar crying out by the Creator. He calls and beckons for us to come back around so we can look him full in his faithful face and worship. And worship really is recognizing the presence of God and adjusting your life. Worship is recognizing this is where I am, this is all that I have, but I want to adjust my life to where God is. I want to come around. And so with that in mind, Job, I'm going to have you come down this way. And all right, and yeah. Yeah. Did God shower today? Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Okay, and so we're gonna, Job, this is a little bit different now, but this is what I think actually happened for Job. Job, in one day, you lost all of your possessions, you lost your closest friends, and you lost your family. So tell me, Job, what can you see?
My God. My God.
Did you hear what he said? And that's it, right there. Because for me, the question I had to ask myself was not, is God in my life? But rather, has God become my life? All of my life. Worship was not something that Job did that day. It was his identity. He was a worshiper. He was one who had come around and had adjusted his life to God so that at the beginning of that day, when he had no idea what was going to take place, this is what he saw. And regardless of what was going to take place, good or bad, it wasn't the presence, P-R-E-S-E-N-T-S, it was the presence, P-R-E-S-E-N-C-E, the nearness of God that made such a difference in his life. Thank you. You can have a seat. Actually, for the band, you can stay up here, and the rest of the band can make their way up. But as we recognize God's presence, it's an attitude of true worship. Our identity is based on the nearness, the presence, E-N-C-E of God. And we're not like fickle little children that have to always be looking in the suitcase and let that be the gauge of whether or not we love God that day. It's just that we are like, he's here. And we find ourselves rejoicing in that. When life grows dark and your image crashes in, make sure you have your ID. Make sure you have your ID. An identity that's rooted in this God-given relationship that we can have through Christ. I was a college student. It was my sophomore year. I commuted all 4 years of college, and I had run home for dinner and just do a few things before going back on campus for some activities that night. My dad and my mom said to myself and my younger brother and sister, hey, we need to have a conversation with you, kind of a family talk. And I knew something in me. I realized it wasn't one of us got in trouble. It was something heavy is going on. And we sat down in our family room, and my dad was very broken, and he shared with us that earlier that day, they'd gotten a report that mom had been diagnosed with cancer. was breast cancer, and it was one of those, it's one of those diagnoses where you don't know how advanced it is or what the next steps are going to be, which is sometimes the worst part, is just the not knowing. And Dad was really broken. My brother and sister and I it was a combination of brokenness and a little bit of shock, and how should we respond? And then there was Mom, who sat there with this deep sense, this completely at peace. And it was almost like Dad's words became real garbled as he was speaking over here. I didn't even remember what he was saying. I just remember looking at my mom thinking, how in the world are you handling this with such grace and peace? I went off back to campus that evening for the activity and came back. My mom had written a note and left it on my pillow. And it said this: Gary, I love you. God has been so good to us. I have a real peace and can even say thank you, Lord, for allowing this right now. I'm not sure why it has happened, but I know we are each growing more like He would have us to become because of it. And then the verse on the stationery that she chose was Psalm 4:7, where it says, God has put gladness in my heart. How was Mom able to do that? Well, I knew Mom had invited God into her life, but it was this moment where I realized this was the relationship my mom had with God, right here. It was His nearness, His presence. As you kind of pictured what took place, could you kind of see yourself up here? Maybe you were thinking, boy, if I lost everything, I can't even say that I have God in my life. We're going to have an opportunity for you to respond, however it is that you feel led to respond. And really, it's called an invitation for a reason. It's not a headlock. It's not a forced time. It is, we invite you to respond to whatever it is that God's saying to you. But here's the thing that we have to understand. It's not us thinking that God is going to show up. It's us coming around and adjusting our lives. How do you need to adjust your life? You may be realizing the first step, you need to invite God into your life. Or maybe you can look back to a time when you've committed your life to the Lord, but you realize, boy, there's a lot between me and God right now. Is there a way that in an act of worship that you can come around and you can adjust your life to Him? And the way we are brought near to God is not by saying, okay, now I'm really serious this time, I'm going to do better. The way we come around to God is where we say, I can't do this. Thank you for sending Jesus to do for me what I could not do for myself. That's the gospel. That's the good news. We place ourselves at the feet of the cross and we accept what Jesus has done on our behalf. We draw near to God with confidence and with boldness because of this work that Jesus has done for us. And the great news is, you don't have to begin to rehearse ways that you're going to clean up your act first. It's right here as you are. Make an adjustment, drawing near to Him. And if you're not sure what to pray, just maybe it begins with, God, I long for your nearness in my life. Let me pray. I'm going to ask you to stand to your feet, and there will be several of us down here that would love to pray with you. Maybe you just want to kneel at the altar. Maybe you want to kind of make where you are your own little altar way to connect with God. But is there a way that God's kind of tugging on you, wooing you to make some adjustments and draw nearer to Him? Father, thank you for the work of Christ done on our behalf. We thank you for examples of biblical characters like Job. May we be faithful and just simply responding as we pour out our hearts and we're honest with you. May we confess that maybe you're some to us, but you've not been all to us. And May that really be the cry of our hearts, be all to us. It's in your name I pray.